The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Welcome to the Wrestling is Real podcast. It's not a normal Wednesday night I would normally be doing this. It's just a weird week, and not just because we have Crown Jewel coming up on Thursday without any traditional pay-per-view that we normally have on a it's just a weird week of wrestling, but it's okay. But then my work week has been weird. It's just the week has just been like this. It's just what it is. I don't know why, but we have a number of things going on, and I want to get my normal rant commentary based on what happened with AEW and WWE last week on Friday and leading up to where it is now, and really just go into that whole discussion, because I feel like I did a TikTok video earlier, talked about it for about a minute, and I said, you know what, I need more time, and I'm not going to have time to talk about this when I'm going to have to do a recap of Crown Jewel probably on Thursday night, and then I'm going to do a recap of Bound for Glory. If I can, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do it on Saturday night. I'm going to try, but the show starts at 10 o'clock Eastern time, and I have to cut off by 2 o'clock. I don't think I can get it done by 3 unless I figure a way out, or I just wait till Sunday to record the recap. Like, I'll figure something out. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but maybe I can get it done. Because, I should only have to do 30 minutes for that show. Unless something really big happens, I'll figure it out. So either which way, that's all coming up this weekend. Saturday night, Bound for Glory. Thursday night, Crown Jewel. And then we have this going on with what happened in what is, people want to call the war, but it's not. It's a chess game. I'm going to explain all that tonight here on the program. I probably won't even go the whole hour. I'm not sure. Just depends on how I go with it. I'm just going to work off of that. But I've set up a show, and I'm going to just run through what I got to say. So let's talk about what actually happened with AEW Rampage and SmackDown on Fox this past Friday night. What the breakdown, every podcaster, every of my fellow podcast brethren, all the journalists out there that are all over this. I mean, Dave Meltzer, nickel and diming this whole thing, Wade Keller, all these people. Listen, and you guys making money, you got your subscriptions, I watch your stuff. Don't get me wrong. But it's this right here where the journalists, I really do feel like they want to make this war something to happen. They're itching at they're chomping at the bit to get the IWC to go ahead and just latch on and start, picking sides. That's what they really want. Now, here's what we got. So the supersized SmackDown, the 2.5 hour FS1 special edition of SmackDown, 866,000 viewers, 18 to 49, 314,000 viewers. Don't forget about the numbers. The 0.2 whatever, don't even worry about that. So out of that 866,000, about a third was comprised of 18 to 49 viewers, which is the targeted advertising demographic. If you are looking to advertise, whether it's Progressive, whether it's Geico, whether it's Pizza Hut, whether it's Domino's, any of those advertisers you see, you notice there, all that advertising, it's always geared towards 18 to 49 years old. That's what they want. You're not necessarily watching car commercials. You're not watching, commercials for like drugs, some medications or Medicare crap. Like, you're not seeing any of that. 18 to 49 years old. Meanwhile, Rampage drew 578,000 viewers and drew 313,000 viewers, 18 to 49. Basically a photo finish. In addition, Rampage beat SmackDown in one demographic in the 30-minute overlap in the 18 to 49. Because what happened there was Rampage took a little more of the audience, had retained more of an 18 to 49 audience of what they had from 10 to 10:30. So they didn't necessarily take away from who was watching their program at 10 o'clock. The older legacy audience, maybe a lot of the IWC, they're probably the ones that stuck around to watch the SmackDown edition and flipped away from Rampage because, maybe they weren't so interested in CM Punk in another match. Maybe that's just what they felt like doing. Okay. Something like that. And also Ruby Soho against the Bunny, right? So everybody had their own thoughts on that. They also outmatched in males 18 to 49, which is the target. That's the audience that AEW, the wrestling audience, really wants. Now, you're not going to win on females when it comes to 18 to 49 years old, but you can win on the male side. That's what you want. So in the 18 to 49, AEW drew 328,000 viewers to WWE's 285,000 viewers. That's it. And you can go through and they look at the numbers in between each quarter hour. It does fluctuate a little bit. So when you look at when things started picking up for SmackDown, it reached over 900,000 viewers when they did the third quarter hour. So that was what? The last 2 minutes of the Balor-Zayn King of the Ring semifinal, Drew McIntyre promo, Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar's vignette, and Naomi's interest in pre-tape promo. That was it. And then it picked up a little bit higher because then you had Sonya Deville doing a promo. Then it was Deville and Shayna Baszler's match, Hit Row promo, Seth Rollins coming in, and Sasha Banks doing a promo. And then the last part, let's do around 10 o'clock, the head-to-head, well, you're looking at, what, 10 o'clock to 10:15. I mean, there's a whole lot to go on. That's just whatever. And as for the YouTube buy-in, the Rampage buy-in, where they had 3 matches on there, which was headlined with Bryan Danielson against Minoru Suzuki. What did it get? Like about 150,000 some odd the first night. And I think when I was watching it live, I saw about 90,000 viewers live streaming. So it wasn't much. We're really not talking much about anything. It's not a big audience we're talking about. A combined, at any given point on this show, you're talking about, what, 1.2 million viewers on a Friday night? Okay. That's still less than what you would get on SmackDown anyway by itself. And, it didn't take much away. It's just that the audience that would have watched Rampage after sticking around for SmackDown, that means you probably have about a couple 100,000 people that will watch Rampage and stick around and watch Rampage after SmackDown. That's pretty much what it tells you. Which is about, what, a third of the audience that will stick around and they will flip over to TNT to watch Rampage. That's all it was. But then we look at what was actually done in terms of the aesthetics. We look at what the posturing has been. Because that's more important than the numbers, than anything else that goes on. If we're ready to talk about this as a war, well, Eric Bischoff probably gave the best, gave a proper explanation, because you don't call this a war, in my way, because there is no head-to-head competition. I mean, consistent head-to-head. If you all read the book from Guy Evans, or if you read the Brian Alvarez book, Death of WCW, or the book on Nitro, you already well know that Ted Turner, and the story's been told over and over, Eric Bischoff was looking to try to get himself an advance up on what was going on with what WCW was doing, that you're going to move ahead. And Ted Turner had asked in a board meeting, what can we do to get WCW better on the map? What can we do to make things better for wrestling? Because Ted Turner always had an affinity for wrestling. Unlike how Tony Khan says that, Ted Turner didn't know much about wrestling, but he was a fan of it. He enjoyed it. He might have followed intently, but he liked it on his network. And the one credit you always got to give is that Ted Turner was the guy that wanted to put it on TV. Like, he loved it, and just was a wrestling fan. And Ted Turner was also one of the most, let's just say, Ted Turner was one of those eccentric broadcasters out there. And that's why I like the man so much, because he didn't give a shit. This is a guy that created Turner time at 5 minutes after. When we talk about 6:05 p.m. Eastern on Saturday nights, it's because Ted Turner, damn it, wanted to start the show at 5 minutes after. And he was the one that gave us a lot of movies we could enjoy. And from my past, I was a big fan of Braves baseball for many years. And he caught a little bit of the Atlanta Hawks. And, you just caught certain things that were on there that were just fascinating on that channel. Superstation TBS was my childhood. What Ted Turner provided, and then bringing in TNT and creating that channel was also part of my childhood and into my college years. I just enjoyed all of it. It was just wonderful. And for me, I'm always going to have a profound respect for Ted Turner and what he did for wrestling and what he did for television. Because what he did for television was fantastic. Hey, even taking the property, this guy, when you look at what Disney does today, where they're picking up the Marvel and the Star Wars properties, this guy did that with movies. He did it with, cartoon library. Listen, Turner buying Hanna-Barbera, buying all the old movies to create. Remember, the guy created Turner Classic Movies. Like, okay, we're going to create a name for this Turner channel. Yeah, Turner Classic Movies. Call it himself, right? And he just had a way of doing things. And he was one of the corporate types that, no matter what the suits he had with him and no matter how the investments went through, this guy made money, hand over foot, and he was a pioneer, a cable pioneer. I don't know how much Vince McMahon would have been affected if not for Ted Turner having the exposure of having wrestling on television that was successful back in the day. So Tony Khan, I hope, I'm sure he understands. Even though how he phrased what he said about Ted Turner is one thing, but, I have a lot of respect for Ted Turner because he brought a lot of what I enjoy about television and broadcasting. That guy is somebody that I consider kind of a role model. I really do. So anyways, all this comes about because of sports that is coming right now, live sports affecting the cable channels, affecting what we're doing right now. So when it comes to Fox, there's a lot of big sports events going on right now when you have Major League Baseball's playoffs, American League Championship Series. I don't know if it was the American League Championship Series that was affecting playing on Friday. And then remember, Fox also has Saturday college football, and they have Thursday night football themselves. So, live sports matter to them, and Fox is somewhat embedded in that, but they're given the Fox Sports 1 spot, which FS1 is getting built up, and for that show, SmackDown, to go ahead and get about 860,000 viewers, when before they were able to get about 950,000 viewers in the previous episodes that they ran last year or the year before, they're able to get pull more from that. So that's one thing to be said there. But for what they were doing, that's still going to be as good a number unless they had baseball that was live. It's going to be hard for them to go and pull those kind of numbers in the first place. You just got to put it out like that. So let me take a story from Deadspin that talks about this. Did we learn anything from Friday night's TV Wrestling War? So moving into this, we know that everything starts off. We could go and point fingers as to who started this all first. When you have two wrestling promotions like this, let's just be honest with each other. We knew that somebody was going to go ahead and light the fuse. That the animosity between these two organizations was going to happen anyway. Somebody was going to be vocal. Somebody was going to make some moves. It was going to happen. There was no doubt about it. So whether it was Cody smashing the throne, which looked like Triple H's throne, to Triple H calling AEW without calling him by name a pissant company, we was referring to Billy Gunn, and a Hall of Fame speech for Degeneration X. You can use all of that. Everybody's, there's a bit of mudslinging already. Not much, but there's a bit. It's not as much because it's not so much where Eric Bischoff, who with Ted Turner's blessing, got the prime time slot head-to-head direct with the WWF at the time. Now that, I can understand why Vince McMahon felt the need to bounce back, because he didn't necessarily jump into the mud at that time. Remember, there was really not much response coming from WWF because they were staying in their lane, which was the mistake that Vince McMahon doesn't want to do right now, which is exactly why he's looking at AEW and he's saying, okay, I'm going to respond here. I'm not going to sit back and wait for something to happen. I'm going to jump in first, because He's got some bravado. He feels like, okay, he can come in right now and he can go ahead and take some shots and he can kind of take a little bit of risk, especially where he's at right now in his comfort level because he has the broadcast partners. He has the stock sharing price at a good level. He's got a lot of money coming in. Last time it was privately owned and not publicly traded at this point. Different story, different time. AEW, to their credit, never tried to provoke the situation by trying to meddle in the programming. They didn't pick Friday or Monday. They didn't even pick a day in between. They picked Wednesday night. So they made their own night. And why NXT was the decision to move it on to USA Network to go head-to-head, not only take it from the hour-long format and create a 2-hour format. I mean, nobody wants to go ahead and make a big deal about this, but WWE took the first shot. They decided to go ahead and start this. They're going to be the initiators of the war, of which this is not a war. That's the other thing. We're never going to get to that point. I really believe there's never going to be a point where I see AEW and WWE directly head-to-head with each other again. I don't know if that's something that's going to be done on purpose. It doesn't make sense to do that again. I don't think you can't do that because cable doesn't matter like it did before. And so to have competing live events doesn't make sense at all. But what we can say right now is that AEW being now entered into the conversation of being synonymous with the professional wrestling moniker, that's going to affect the WWE because for them, you know, they want to be, they want to keep the monopoly they've had on because they earned the monopoly. Let's just say it like that too. WCW made mistakes. Eric Bischoff made mistakes. Things were mismanaged. There was a lot of irresponsibility in that brand. We all saw that. It was still kind of trudging along for a couple of years until the AOL deal came into play, and then WCW was sold. And no one had a chance to take it, and Vince McMahon was able to successfully acquire the library, and he can do what he wants with it. He bought his competition, an ultimate victory, and no one can ever take that away from him. He was able to successfully take down every other territory that ever was in their way. Because also, the same thing happened with the territories. What Vince McMahon is doing right now is no different than what he did with the territories. Because he decided to initiate going nationwide and putting his brand out there to everybody. I mean, sure, Georgia Championship Wrestling at the time in the early 80s was out there, but, you know, the early pioneering days of cable where in the 80s you started seeing some programming get on cable and then ultimately get national exposure, which is what AWA got, which is what World Class Championship Wrestling got, which is why it's still memorable to us, because it was a little more effective to go and watch there than it was on syndication, because even syndication was kind of tough to go and catch certain channels and certain TV shows when you're trying to go ahead and watch Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, or watch UWF. Or even to watch Pro Wrestling This Week, because it's not going to be caught up in every market. So that's going to be part of it. And that's what we had before. And for Vince McMahon to go and go along and continue to say, okay, any competition, we're going to handle them. It's not so much to make sure that their own product is steady and growing and doing better. There's a bit of a neglect on that part. We've already talked about that. But besides what Dave Meltzer said this week or the other day on Wrestling Observer Radio, I don't believe that he's not, you know, he talks about they need to make some major changes. Well, they've made those changes. We have to see the payoff of those changes. NXT 2.0 was a change. And there are other changes that are going to happen because their broadcast partners are going to be on their ass about it. We know that too. But they have to figure their shit out. Things have to go and come to pass and make sure they can get themselves somewhere where they need to go. So they got to figure that out. And this is also what they're doing right now with some of the changes they've made. NXT 2.0, we've already said, I'm going to repeat it again, it was ultimately a response to what happened with NXT when they put them up head-to-head against AEW. And let's just say it like this, too. I said this when NXT was put over to AEW. Was it going to last? Because I thought there was going to be a longevity to doing this idea. NXT was being thrown to the wolves. It was sacrificed for the sake of dredging up the growth, the eventual initial infancy of AEW. They did this on purpose to stunt the growth, to slow them down a bit, because it would give WWE a chance to kind of build things back up. But then the pandemic happened, and that also just put a big ringer on everybody. And to the credit, WWE did a pretty good job of finding a way to sustain themselves with the Thunderdome, even though, it got really old after a while. But I will say what they were able to do was pretty commendable. Listen, they did it. They were able to survive and keep the show going. They never missed a week. They honored their broadcast partners. They did a damn good job of it. Got to give them credit there. AEW also did a very good job. And I think they probably did a little bit better because they took a little bit of risk by being able to go and use the outdoor venue, the resources in front of them, to have a residency at Daly's Place, home of the Jags, and be able to do that show in that amphitheater setting. And then have a limited crowd, and then eventually start pulling an audience there. And at the same time, AEW, not from a war, from a conflict kind of credit, AEW was being strategic. This is where I talk about they're playing chess. The chess move that was played first by AEW was when the touring started coming back up. When everything started opening up to where they could start touring again, and they saw where UFC was doing well, and other events were starting to get put up, and you're starting to see crowds, and the fall season of sports with football and baseball starting to come back, and all that's going on, and basketball to some point, when certain states opened up for live events, AEW went first. They're the ones that first went with a live crowd. And then they started doing other things where they said, okay, we're going to get more people out there, double or nothing. Let's get a full crowd at Daly's Place. Let's go and do some other things. And for WWE, they needed to go ahead and get themselves moving anyway because the broadcast partners, their shareholders, they had to get moving. So SummerSlam was going to be the next anchor show they were going to put. But in between, they did pull off WrestleMania with a live crowd, to their credit as well. But they had to be pushed to do it. But this is also Vince himself, to his own credit, pushing the envelope because he wanted to get the shows back up, because he knew what was going to be best in terms of getting the business back up. He needed things to go back up to full speed. We're now at full speed on both brands. And everybody else, every other organization except for Ring of Honor, they're now basically back to full speed. We're seeing in front of crowds every wrestling show. It's been wonderful to watch. I love it. Now, the chess move of AEW first, going with what they did. Then the other chess moves were the signings, of which the door was open by WWE. Why wouldn't they go after Adam Cole, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, Ruby Soho? Why not? If you have the opportunity to go after Andrade, Malachi Black, why not? If they decided to go and do it, it only worked for them because it did overall. They're now selling the gates on bigger venues. They got Chicago, New York, they're going to get Minnesota. They're now able to have the capacity if they wanted to, but they shouldn't. All right. I think them keeping to mid-sized venues for certain markets and then going into big cities and the bigger venues is the right move until they really get this promotion at a certain level where it feels like the ratings and the ticket sales really warrant that there's an over resounding want of people to buy tickets to go to these shows. When you know that demand is out there, then you increase the supply. But they don't have to necessarily do that right away. But they are starting to make that growth. You know, the next phase of them trying to grow themselves. When they have the kind of roster they have now, they were able to pull off Arthur Ashe Stadium successfully. United Center successfully. You know, when they're able to pull those sellouts like they did, that's pretty commendable. And that tells you a lot. They're not going to go to the stadiums yet. I don't think anything like that's going to happen. That's where WWE is always going to be in front of them because of what they have. And that's most important, is that when it comes down to it, WWE can still get big crowds. They can still pull a big crowd like they did for SummerSlam, like they will for Survivor Series, like they will for Royal Rumble, like they will for WrestleMania. Like, I have no doubt they're going to find a way to fill 100,000 seats in that damn Dallas AT&T Stadium. That is a level where AEW is going to want to be someday. But this is why WWE, regardless, they have great broadcast deals. You got prime time on network TV on Fox. And you got the backing of Fox and all their sports division. That's just huge. Their promos running on every NFL football game and Major League Baseball and college football. Like, they're running in front of their promotions in front of big crowds. Not so much where NBC Universal can do, but they can as well. But NBC Universal is running, like, okay, during Sunday Night Football or during college football or during other things, where the power of the promotion of those two major brands through their streaming service, because really for NBC Universal, it's the fact that WWE has the streaming service. AEW doesn't. Even though AEW is trying to look at maybe there's a possibility of doing it. But, I mean, it still comes down to the fact that WWE had so many years in front of themselves and all this, you know, branding and capital of themselves. You know, the value of their brand that has been built for so long, even at this weaker creative state, that WWE brand, if people wanted to put that up for sale, you know they could sell that thing like it would be the UFC. WWE right now, the value would be in the billions, multi-billions of dollars. So that's what it comes down to as well. Like, no matter what, if the wholesale thing was going on right now, where do you know that World Wrestling Entertainment would get sold for billions of dollars? But the value could be increased and fortified once they get their creative together. Once they get themselves right, they'll be in a better place. But in the meantime, they're punching down. It doesn't make sense why they're punching down with AEW, why it even matters to that. But that's the chess move. They chose to do that. It's a mistake. When WWE decides to make a move, it's a big move. Now, the touring thing was a big move on AEW's part, but they were also, most importantly, out of respect to the company. They're not even running in the same venues that are basically tagged WWE Stomping Grounds. They're not even doing that. They're doing like what WCW did back in the day, or what NWA did back in the day, where they ran different venues. If they run in Miami, they run at Coral Gables. They run at the University of Miami Stadium. If they run in Orlando, they're running at UFC Stadium, or UFC's arena. Okay? Dallas, to go outside of Dallas to the Curtis Caldwell Center. They're going to some venue outside of Greater Atlanta to run a show. Instead of running the Barclays or Madison Square Garden, they ran Arthur Ashe Stadium, which was a great move, by the way. Chicago, they didn't go to the Rosemont or the Allstate Arena. They went to United Center. That's what they chose to do, right? And that's what they're doing. And then you also see they're not running into other markets. Like, I haven't seen them going to LA yet, right? They haven't gone to, I don't know I'm trying to remember what other Western markets they've gone to, San Fran or Seattle or some of the other ones. I don't know I can't remember where they've gone outside of there. I remember they went to Denver, I believe it was. But they're not running the normal run of venues like WWE does. Like, they're not running Columbus, Ohio. They're not running the secondary, metro cities like that, or Nashville, or they're not going to Corpus Christi, or they're not going to Lubbock, Texas. They're not going to Lafayette, Louisiana. They're not going to, not running Tampa. They're not running, if they're running Charlotte, they're running, a different arena. They're running Bojangles Coliseum. They're not running the major Charlotte arena where the Hornets were playing, and I forget who it is now. They're not doing any of that. Or the Bobcats, that's what it is. That's what they do. AEW is running on their own track, but they are obviously finding some success and getting some bigger gates. They found success in what they're doing with their broadcast partner in terms of being able to put a good deal in play to get exposure. Like, they're on a good channel. They're on a channel. They're on a pair of channels that have great clearance, and they're already synonymous with wrestling for people of the past. That move to TBS is going to be huge. It's really great. I'm not been so much on right now watching Rampage on Friday nights. I think hopefully they'll pick a different night for that, and hopefully they'll pick like an earlier time. Because I think that 10 o'clock time slot it's going to be tough. But I think running Rampage, maybe not so much on a Friday. I wish it would be on a Saturday, honestly. But if there was some way to do something, I don't know how you're going to do that. Either which way. In this Deadspin story, let me get back to that. The initial fight between AEW and NXT essentially was WWE sending out its pawns first. Even more apt metaphor given the way the company higher-ups have completely altered NXT to better service the main roster, perhaps gearing up for future battles with AEW by skewing younger, which is what they have to do. They know. There's been the reports now that WWE is very aware. They have a lot of 40-year-olds that are running the shop right now, and they have to fix the ship right there. They have to get some younger talent to build up. But they've kind of failed on a lot of the talent that was brought up for NXT because it wasn't the vision that Vince had. It was Triple H's vision. But Triple H, even I think he knew that as long as those stars that he was bringing in were not going to get necessarily brought up to the main roster, it didn't matter. Because there was a while that before Triple H really had that full grasp, some of the stars they had been building up had failed coming up to the main roster. And if there was anybody that really felt like we could do something with them, they were going to go to the main roster anyways. That's what it really came down to. But either which way, it's not what they're going to do. It's not what they decide to go and work on. They're just not going to worry about that. They're more concerned about the roster they're going to bring up now. The people that are definitely what's invested right now, whether it's Braun Breaker, whether it's Andre Chase or Tony D'Angelo, whether it's Cora Jade, like whoever there is, with some of the mainstays that are there that might eventually get pushed up, like Raquel Gonzalez or Tommaso Ciampa. Like, who knows if Von Wagner will go well, but it's obvious that you can see which stars are getting a quick ramp up right now. And then eventually, when they get moved up to that main roster, it's just going to be an immediate push-up. They're not going to wait too long to have certain stars grab the belt, do something with it, and then move on. If they feel like there's somebody that really is starting to take off and get viral, I think you'll see an immediate ramp up, a call up to the main roster pretty quick. I don't think they're going to wait too long if somebody starts breaking out. They're going to just feel like they have no choice. They're going to have to take some of the rebuilding. They're going to have to get some young stars out there. If they're starting to get some ground, if they're starting to get some virality, then let's bring them on up. They can't wait. It's time to start replacing some of the stars they have left that have been mainstays for so long, or that some of those mainstays have to become, they have to start taking the pins now for some of these younger stars. They have to start mentoring. They have to start working up. So at somewhere down the line, Vince McMahon is going to have to get the Randy Ortons, the Dolph Zigglers, the Bobby Roodes, the Rey Mysterios, Bobby Lashley's, I would imagine, at some point, Drew McIntyre's. Eventually down the line, some of these stars, they're going to have to become what Jeff Hardy has become, or what, maybe like a Sheamus has become, where there's just certain stars they're going to get worked with that you're going to have to try to build up, and that's what's going to happen. But right now, It's obviously easier with the women's division because of what they're doing right now. They've had some bad mojo when it comes to Shayna Baszler, but I think they finally got her in the right direction. I don't get the whole thing of how Doudrop was actually winning the Queen's Court tournament, but obviously they have something more in store with Shayna Baszler. It was a fluke win. That's how they decided to maybe make it look like she was being protected by losing that way. Because then you can also see where there might be certain stars in the women's division they might care about, but we know that all the matches of the Queen's Court tournament were less than 3 minutes each. And somebody with Zelina Vega, she'll be the one that wins this after all, and she can use that as a bit of a gimmick. That's fine. When it comes to Finn Balor and Xavier Woods in the King of the Ring tournament final, I can see where King Balor comes into play and Xavier Woods does not. It doesn't make sense for having a king within the New Day and how that might look altogether. A little more division there would be than a cohesion with that unit right now. So AEW, like I said, with their live shows, they were never trying to go directly against. Even when they did SmackDown, when they had the Rampage show, they put it on after SmackDown. They don't have to expect that the SmackDown audience is going to roll over from watching on Fox over to TNT at 10 o'clock at night. But they're hoping, well, people are already watching on a Friday night. Why not get them at 10 o'clock? And as for Rampage, they're already taping for Dynamite. No, they're already tipping extra matches, so they could do that as part of what they're doing for Dynamite. Why not? Like, it's for them, it is just that extra hour to put on for more exposure to their audience, which was already offered by TNT in the first place. So that's okay, too. And that's where I don't get where the TNT's mentality of why they're doing the late night programming, putting on something at 10 o'clock one night a week to see what it does. But there's quite a few shows that run at 10 o'clock at night anyway on cable. So the thought is this is just another new show that is always new every week. And they could put that out there and see how it does. And it's already part of the deal. So if they're able to get 3 hours of content for the production that's being done for that show now, then why not? So that makes sense there. But this new thing that happened now, it's obvious that the sports programming that Cable Network have right now in the fall have brought this new opportunity to light. And we're going to get it again next week. So SmackDown and Rampage are going to have the same thing happen over and over because most likely we're going to get the World Series. And the World Series, or actually, what is it? If it's necessary, the ALCS, which I believe it is right now, they're going to need a 6th game. Or a 5th game, I forget what it is. So they're going to go to that. And then, okay, so it's time to go ahead and preempt SmackDown on Fox and move it back to FS1 for a second week. And it could be a third week because of the World Series. So the opportunity for WWE to kind of put a dent on Rampage's audience, they're going to take that advantage. Why not? So with that said, the other thing that's been done, which is the chess move on WWE's part, you saw the chess moves. So first of all, Fox Sports 1 offered the 30 minutes. I don't know if the WWE was offered the 30 minutes or if they asked for it, but something happened where somebody discussed, let's give you 30 minutes on the back end. Let you go up against TNT 10 o'clock at night on Friday night, see what happens. Okay. So they decided to go with that. And they ran their best content from 10 to 10:30 that night and commercial free. So absolutely make it almost impossible to tempt the audience to stick around for SmackDown on Fox after the fact. And make sure they stuck around for not only Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch in that match, but to see the contract signing immediately after of Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns. Like, that's a lot they put in right there. Normally you could run a full SmackDown show just sandwich with those two things going on and do it like that. But they put it all there at the end of the night. The other thing, too, that we've been hearing about as well from the likes of the Dave Meltzers of the world is the ratings being put out because of how Nielsen is able to go and report ratings and how sometimes we get what's called the fast nationals. So the immediate overnight results of ratings, which is incomplete, is preliminary ratings. So those are the fast nationals. And WWE, since they already subscribe, or Fox or FS1 or whatever, you know, WWE can get access to those ratings because of their broadcast partners. And once that information is out there, they'll go ahead and they'll leak it to try to go and see if it'll hurt Rampage's ratings, because it'll hurt what TNT's doing, or what TNT's doing anyway in general. That's what they want to try to do. Now, in this Deadspin story, they say the overarching story since AEW's inception has been it's for the more hardcore fan, a target market that will always skew younger than legacy fans WWE has held on to for decades. The average casual fan isn't going to be as familiar with AEW's roster because they aren't as accustomed to scouring websites and streaming channels to watch other companies where all that talent has come from. They've only ever had time to watch WWE for so long because it's merely a reflex for them. The average viewer is in their 50s. So we already know what the audience is for both of those shows. And it's actually, there's a little bit of overlapping, which is the really interesting part. Really, AEW has their audience and WWE has their audience. And there's not a whole lot of overlapping in between. So the other part is, it's not necessarily where what WWE does is necessarily going to help get AEW viewers, people that would watch AEW, back over to the main brand. No, because people have already made up their mind. If they're kind of already been jilted by WWE or NXT programming for a while, then they're not going to go back to them, because the intent of AEW was to give an alternative, be the home of professional wrestling, and that's what they're doing, trying to bringing back wrestling tradition, bringing out the type of wrestling that people might have enjoyed in ECW or WCW, the better part of what was out there, and also seeing a better showcase for all this indie talent that was out there that was killing it, and now getting a place where they could really be shining. It's like this. It's all a great thing. I mean, for me, I really don't feel like I'm watching anything low quality or something that's kind of just squeezed together. Like, I feel like when I watch Dynamite and Rampage, they're really cramming in a lot of stuff. Even Dark and Dark Elevation, I feel like they're cramming in a lot of stuff. It's not slow. It's not just trudging along. I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm struggling to watch. AEW just runs different. It's just a better way of being done. With WWE, SmackDown does run pretty quick. NXT, to a point, it gets my interest because it's just so many different names and faces. But the other thing, too, is that you can tell with AEW, it's more organic. You could tell that the wrestlers are kind of able to go and really have more say into what their characters are, what they're doing, and the booking is very sensible. It's reasonable in many different ways, and it's a great mix of young and old. I really feel that way too. In this story, they wrap up by saying, what we can say for sure is that AEW is most definitely a real player in the top playpen of the industry. Friday night only affirmed that. And what we can also say is the only true winners are the fans, with both companies wheel posing to try to outdo the other. We get 3 very good to great shows. And then Raw, well, hopefully that'll change. And then we get these kind of debates, which though some might not like, it's also part of the fun of being a fan. It can lead to some tribal debates that get annoying in a hurry, but if you consume it all as a whole, you do get a lot of good stuff. So there's a lot there. Not to mention, there's a whole lot of things that AEW doesn't have the clout of. I mean, they haven't really anchored their pay-per-views to a point where, you absolutely, the event itself will just say what it is. Like, AEW at some point will have what is going to be their WrestleMania, what will be their Royal Rumble, what will be their SummerSlam, what will be their Survivor Series. We'll see how that goes. Like, I feel like Double or Nothing really feels like that now. And All In, those are the two big anchor shows. Like, All In, that's like, feels like that is the main one, or All Out, because I feel like that's the one that really stands in, and that's the anchor of the show with what they've done is traditional. Even Full Gear does feel like something, like, don't get me wrong, the 4 shows they have right now, there's a lot of things they could be doing that I am glad they don't do, and they have not decided to do. There's a whole lot of things they do absolutely right. I love 4 shows a year. They could go 6, but I don't think they have to. But also remember, next year, we're not talking about this, but TBS is supposed to be next year, or actually TNT is supposed to be next year. We haven't talked about this, but in the new differentiation, the deal they made, where TNT and TBS now split up the time, and TBS is going to get Dynamite next year. Remember, we're supposed to be getting specials that TNT is supposed to be doing next year, a la Clash of the Champions. We're going to get those. So we're going to get several of those a year that would take the place of what could have been a pay-per-view. And then you keep the value of all those 4 pay-per-views, those quarterly pay-per-views, to make them important. And we're obviously seeing more wrestling's doing that right now, where if you're going to have multiple shows, other pay-per-views like Impact Plus, listen, Impact does a really good job of what they're doing when it comes to having their shows. So Revolution, Hard to Kill, Slammiversary, and Bound for Glory, they're damn good shows. Damn good shows. And that's the best part. So I can appreciate all they're doing right there, and it's really, really good. Okay, I got a few other things I got to bring up. So I have all the links to all the rating stuff if you want to go look for it. I put it into the show notes. A couple of things I do want to bring up here is the fact that the ratings did not do well for Raw. They had another record low rating. Another big Monday Night Football game that went pretty well. I'll bring that up real quick. Showbiz Daily talked about that the show drew an average of 1.593 million viewers. Listen, you're going to start with Drew McIntyre and Big E at the top, or you're going to even with Charlotte Flair and Bianca Belair. It's not pulling. And you're going up against Monday Night Football. You're not going to do well. First of all, you had an upset of Tennessee Titans over the Buffalo Bills, which was a big game they had the other night. That was fun. And it drew 12.5 million viewers on ESPN. Then you also had Major League Baseball. Again, that's just a double whammy. That's just going to hurt them. Now, they did rank number 7 in the top 150 shows on cable for the night. But there's just a number of matches and things they had in there that just really didn't matter. Like, if you're looking at quality on the show, well, Doudrop Chain of Baszler it was a quick match. Xavier Woods Jinder Mahal was something to see, but we were just hoping that Xavier Woods was going to win. Non-title with Randy Orton, Riddle, and Street Profits. We've seen this kind of thing before. Big E, Drew McIntyre, and can they coexist against Dolph Ziggler, Robert Roode? The Charlotte Flair, Bianca Belair match was very good. I'll just say it like that. It does suck to see the DQ at the end. I said, go home show for Crown Jewel. There wasn't much when it comes to Crown Jewel on this show. And that's it. The breakdown of the audience for first, second, and third hour. 1.64, 1.577, 1.624 for 9 o'clock, 1.577 for hour 3. Whew. Sixth lowest total viewership in the history of Raw. And meanwhile, AEW Dynamite being on Saturday night, being stuck in their spot, they're still doing well because of the ratings compared to what they were doing in previous Saturday nights. They still did better with all the new additions, with what they did. And they didn't necessarily go ahead and, drop in like a major card. Like, they just gave us really what a Dynamite show normally is. They give us a pretty damn good show. 727,000 viewers. And the last Saturday night episode was 649,000 viewers, June 26th. So they did what they did. And that was because they were preempted for NBA playoffs. And so all this kind of shake up that we had this week really kind of helped out to kind of build up some things when it comes to what was going to happen with, just to see how things would go out. The potential of the head-to-head. Just a sniff of 30 minutes right here and there. I think what they said this week, SmackDown was going to have a Talking Smack episode right after SmackDown on FS1 to go up against head-to-head with Rampage. So instead of putting an extra commercial-free show, they're just going to have Talking Smack on, try to do something there to hopefully try to draw the viewers away. Well, that makes sense. I understand where they're going with that there. Okay, so Crown Jewel is this Thursday. I will do a post-show. I don't know if it's going to be set up where I'll do it. I'm going to try to do it Thursday night. Or if I do it in the afternoon, I don't know. But there's a whole lot going on the schedule. My calendar's kind of messed up. And I got to work while I'm watching Crown Jewel. So I have to work my way around and see how I'm going to make it work and make it happen. I'll figure it out from here. But I know that my schedule tomorrow and Thursday are crazy because I have to go and virtually help cover the MJ Business Conference in Las Vegas, which will be a whole lot going on there. So what I'm looking at right now, I'm going to be jam-packed booked from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'll figure something out on when I'm going to do this. Most likely, I'll probably record a Crown Jewel post show later on in the night. So it's not going to be right after immediately after the show, but it'll be on Thursday night. I'll do the show. I'll do that show on my Broadcasters podcast as normally scheduled. So got to double up that day. Whew. A lot of work. So anyway, so far we have Mustafa Ali and Mansoor. I think Mansoor will get the win. I think Finn Balor will be king of the ring over Xavier Woods. I think Zelina Vega will become queen in the Queen's Crown tournament. They could very well do Doudrop. I don't know why. I mean, I guess they could, right? I wouldn't like it, but oh well. Hell in a Cell, Edge versus Seth Rollins. We have praised this storyline. This is very good. This is indicative of what they're able to do. When WWE is at their best, they can pull storylines like this. But of course, they got some real veteran talent working this storyline. So it works really well. And I think Seth Rollins will get the win on this. Goldberg versus Bobby Lashley. I know, sure, Goldberg should get the win because he's trying to avenge his kid, Gage. But I still think Bobby Lashley should get the win anyway. Why does Goldberg need to get the win here? They could do it. I'm not going to like it, though. I think it's going to be upsetting to see Goldberg take the win. I don't want that for Bobby Lashley. I don't want him to take a step down because I think losing to Goldberg is a step down for him after being champion for all places. There's a whole lot to do more with him, and I think you're going to weaken Bobby Lashley by having him lose to Goldberg. I really do feel that way. Big E versus Drew McIntyre. I'm going to take the upset. I'm going to say Drew McIntyre wins the WWE Championship. I think Big E drops the belt to Crown Jewel. I think this is the show, the way they've built it up. It would really suck if they just kept it predictable and nobody lost the belt. But I think that's what's going to happen here. I think we're going to see a couple of title changes. So I think Big E will drop the belt to Drew McIntyre. I think RK Bro is going to retain over AJ Styles and Omos for the Raw Tag Team titles. SmackDown Women's title, that'll be a hell of a match. I hope they get a lot of time. And I'm sure they're going to probably position it in a good place because they need to go and make sure to kind of show the progression of what they're doing to kind of modernize Saudi Arabia with this match. We already know that the ladies are going to be in different attire. They'll be much more conservatively dressed for this. Bianca Belair even made points about that. Also, the fact it'll be her first international trip she's ever made of this scale. And so I do think Sasha Banks wins this or Becky Lynch retains. I think it's either one of those two. I don't think Bianca Belair takes SmackDown Women's title to Raw. I think her working with Charlotte Flair, you go with that and have her continue to chase. I think that's where it works best. And the Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns is going to win. It's going to be... But I wonder what people are trying to say. Will Paul Heyman turn the screws on... will they turn the screws on Roman Reigns? I still think it's very soon to go and take the belt off of Roman Reigns. But I also have to be realistic and say, you know what? WWE could very well say, you know what? Let's get Roman Reigns to lose the belt, because Roman Reigns is getting cheered right now. He's not a heel. As long as he's with Paul Heyman, he's not. So they could very well say, okay, let's take it back to where we were. Brock Lesnar will beat Roman Reigns because of a turncoat Paul Heyman, and then Paul Heyman comes back in, and we'll say we had him all along. Screw the tribal chief. They could very well do that. If they do it, I can understand it. It's going to suck to have another part-time champion again. But then we'll obviously see Roman Reigns and the Usos in the bloodline will become faces, automatic, because of that. I think they could very well do that if they decide to. So keep that in mind. I think they could really do that if they wanted to. Now, Impact Wrestling Bound for Glory, I'll say, the ratings have not been good for Impact Wrestling, and I think, they've been doing what they've been doing with their roster, and they've had the inclusion of, Chris Bay and the Finesse Club, part of the Bullet Club, and Thin Juice and Jay White, and I don't think it's been pretty tough for them to really make all those people coming into the mix from New Japan, make them important. And Hikuleo, all of that. I think that smaller crowd has hurt, and I think when they get now in front of Vegas and the Sam's Town crowd, which, by the way, they sold out the event, sold out Sam's Club, so we're going to at least see, 11 to 1,500 fans in attendance, which is going to be great, and hopefully they'll get a similar audience for their tapings coming up. But some of the things they're doing with some of their matches, they're really just kind of just pedestrian. I mean, the matches are good, but I feel it was a little bit boring and a little bit formulaic. It is formulaic. Let's just say it like that. Impact can do better. And, I don't mind some of the things they do with their vignettes. Those are fine. But, I mean, they also are a little bit kind of into that parody booking themselves. And they're trying to find a way to incorporate all the former WWE talent and trying to build them up, which is what they've been trying to do now since they were really trying to do that since Hard to Kill, and then also afterwards when they had Revolution. I just feel like, okay, we've seen Heath come into play. We've seen Brian Myers. We've seen W. Morrissey. And now we have Steve Macklin as well. So there's a lot of those kind of stars that are in the play right now, and I'm just waiting for some of these characters to kind of build up and become something. Followed by Design, getting the build off of that. And I'm feeling some of the characters they have are a bit stagnant when it comes to Willie Mack, Rich Swann, Sami Callihan's on the shelf, Eddie Edwards. I mean, they're incorporating some feuds to put some things together, but there's not been a lot of intensity. And even with the Christian Cage title reign, I mean, the focus has been more, to me, on Josh Alexander and the build up to that. And, the story of Option C is a wonderful way to go. Austin Aries did very well with it, so did Chris Sabin. So let's see what they do. In terms of the matches they have this weekend, so X Division Championship, Trey Miguel versus Steve Macklin versus El Phantasmo. This is for the vacated X Division Championship. I think Trey Miguel takes that belt. Deonna Purrazzo versus Mickie James, the Impact Knockouts Championship. I think Deonna will retain. I'll hold the world title for a second. Call your shot gauntlet. There's going to be 20 people in the match. W. Morrissey won a battle royal to be the 20th member in it's going to be the fourth. There's 4 people in the Call Your Shot gauntlet, but he entered into the battle royal and was able to be the last person coming out of the gauntlet. So he comes out number 4. Brian Myers, Rich Swann, Moose, W. Morrissey. That's where we are. Then we also have the Impact Digital Media Championship, which you got to be Impact Plus to really be involved with that, to really know what's going on. But in that match, it's anybody's game. Crazy Steve versus John Scally versus Fallon Bob versus Jordan Grace versus 2 other opponents who have yet to have their matches shown, so we can find out who's going to be competing, because we got to wait for Impact Plus to show. And then Heath and Rhino will team back up together, which we don't know if Heath and Rhino will coexist like it's Followed by Design. So I think Followed by Design wins, and Rhino, I don't know, something happens with Heath and Rhino, and they split their own feud. I think that's what happens there. I'm going to say W. Morrissey will get the Call Your Shot gauntlet. I think he'll be the one that gets the title shot, or whichever title he wants. I think it's what happens with him. They obviously have something behind it, and I think Josh Alexander beats
to the Wrestling is Real
for the Impact World title. That's where
you can find all previous episodes at WrestlingIsReal.com.
And I'm going to be coming back
to the show on all
in
major
roughly 48 hours
outlets,
to come back in front of this microphone.
Amazon,
after having
Google,
watched Crown
Spotify,
Jewel
and iHeartRadio,
Saudi Arabia. We'll talk about
the
that
King of
coming up.
Podcasts on Twitter,
and then I'll
Facebook,
also be back
and Instagram,
most likely
King of
Saturday
Podcasts,
night or Sunday night,
and search King
to
of
do a
Podcasts
recap
on
of
YouTube.
Well, I'm going to try to do Saturday night. We'll see what happens.
YouTube.com/.
Hopefully, they're not going to go way over the top after 10 o'clock. We'll stay for 3 hours. We can get it done.
This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts.
Anyway, we'll leave it there.
Radio Network.
Thanks for listening in, as you always do. Come back in 48 hours for another Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us.